We tend to picture Stone Age humans huddled in caves, barely surviving, but the evidence tells a completely different story. With nothing but sticks, stones, and pure will, our ancestors dominated the environment, hunting some of the most dangerous animals to ever roam this planet. From massive beasts that could flatten a man and others that could swallow you whole. Today we're looking at the actual hard evidence that ancient humans hunted the biggest animals on Earth. And by the end of this video, you'll never underestimate a Stone Age human again, because we're also going to look at the evidence that these hunters pushed the megafauna into extinction. First, let's look at one of the most remarkable discoveries ever found. In a cave in Russia's Ural Mountains, scientists found thousands of cave bear bones, but one skull stood out. Archaeologists discovered a strange jagged hole in the back of the brain case, a hole that perfectly matched stone spear points found nearby. Clearly, someone speared a cave bear in the head 35,000 years ago. The bone never healed, meaning the bear died from the blow. And the position of the wound tells us that the hunter was standing behind and above the bear when they did it. So why was the bear just sitting there? Well, because it was hibernating. This hunter walked into a cave, found a sleeping cave bear, and stabbed it through the skull. But while this may seem like an easy task, cave bears were massive. Males weighed up to 1,300 pounds, making them one of the most dangerous animals of the Ice Age. And contrary to popular belief, hibernating bears aren't fully asleep. During winter, they get up, walk around, and are ready to defend themselves. With this in mind, imagine sneaking into a dark cave in the depths of winter with nothing but a stone-tipped spear. If you miss your stab by an inch, the bear would shred you to pieces in seconds. But this is far from the only direct evidence that humans hunted cave bears. The cave of Hohlfels in southern Germany has yielded a treasure trove of ancient human artifacts, including figurines and flutes dating back to 40,000 years ago. But dozens of cave bear bones have been found butchered and burned. In 2000, archaeologists discovered a vertebrae with a flint point embedded in it. The projectile hit the cave bear on his right flank and stuck in the bone and broke off. This injury alone would not have killed the bear, but butchery marks on the rest of the bear's skeleton proved that the hunt was successful. The angle of attack suggests that the bear was laying down or hibernating. This site is 2,000 miles away from the Russian site, but both of these populations seem to have hunted cave bears in the winter. But the next example of a bear hunt is the most dramatic discovery of the Stone Age, a bear hunt gone horribly wrong. At a tiny, narrow cave in Switzerland, archaeologists discovered a bear and a man cramped in the back of the cave. Both date to 14,000 years ago. The story got even more intriguing when a dozen stone projectiles were found among the bones, and one was even found in the bear's neck vertebrae. Archaeologists began to realize that this was direct evidence of a hunt gone wrong, preserved for over 14,000 years. Paleontologist and cave bear specialist Philip Morel came to the conclusion that the bear was wounded out in front of the cave and retreated inside. Numerous charcoal fragments found inside the cave far exceed a simple campfire. It appears that the hunter was trying to smoke his prey out of the cave. Perhaps thinking the bear had expired, he climbed into the cave, descending a narrow passage. The bear, still clinging to life, attacked. By the time the adrenaline wore off and the blood left the veins, the two lay dead, and for all of human history remained next to each other until their excavation. This discovery is truly 1 in a billion and proves just how willing ancient humans were to face danger head-on. But this bear was a mere cockroach compared to the next animal ancient humans hunted. At up to 8 tons, the woolly mammoth was as large as the biggest African elephants alive today. And we have direct evidence that ancient humans took them on with sticks and stones. In 2008, ivory hunters in Siberia noticed something poking out of the ground. What followed was one of the most stunning archaeological discoveries in history. Over 1,000 mammoth bones from at least 31 individuals, all in one place. But here's where it gets incredible. Several of those bones had stone spear points embedded directly in them. One shoulder blade had a hole driven right through it. Another had 2 stone fragments and a sliver of ivory inside, likely from the shaft of the weapon itself. Every single wound was aimed at the same spot, behind the shoulder blade, right where the heart is. One spear in the heart, and even the largest mammoths would fall. These hunters knew exactly what they were doing, and cave paintings in Spain and France even back this up. Mammoths are depicted with heart symbols and spear markings painted over their vital organs. This knowledge was spread across the entire continent. But what weapon was powerful enough to drive a stone point clean through a mammoth's shoulder? A spear unlike anything most people imagine. Stone Age weapons are often depicted as crude, bulky spears, but in reality, these people used sophisticated multi-part weapons. A wooden shaft was used for the main body, while the foreshaft was made of a more durable material such as mammoth ivory or woolly rhino horn. A razor-sharp stone point was secured to the tip, while sometimes stone flakes were hafted on the sides, making an incredibly deadly composite tool. Another find from Siberia consists of a mammoth vertebrae with a round hole and stone flakes embedded on two sides. This is the most direct evidence found that humans were using incredibly complex composite weapons to hunt mammoths. These spears were likely thrown on the tips of spear throwers, also known as archeologii, weapons which allow you to throw spears much farther and faster than by hand. The hunters at the Yana site were undoubtedly able to take down a mammoth, but the site got even more intriguing when researchers took a closer look. By measuring the bones, researchers found that 69% of the mammoths killed were adolescents and young adults. Over half fell within an incredibly narrow range. These hunters were selecting particular animals, almost like a harvest. At that age, mammoth tusks were large enough to be useful, but not yet too curved to work with. Furthermore, the rest of the mammoth remains show no evidence that they were butchered. They were clearly hunting mammoths for their ivory. Nearby the mammoth remains, archaeologists discovered a separate main living site that had thousands of bones of bison and reindeer, the main prey of these people. Of the thousands of animal bones found at the main living site, researchers found 5 tiny fragile bones that supported a mammoth's tongue. These bones are completely useless, unless there's a fatty tongue attached to them. These people were so well fed that they hunted the largest animals in their environment, ate the tongue as a delicacy, and left the rest behind. Of the 31 mammoths at the site, only 4 showed physical proof of being hunted. The other 27 almost certainly were too. The spears just hit soft tissue and left no trace on the bone. Think about that. You can kill a mammoth and leave 0 archaeological evidence, which means everything we know about ancient mammoth hunting is likely just a fraction of what actually happened. And while our ancestors were undeniably fearless hunters, they were mere boys compared to the Neanderthals. Before our species even left Africa, Neanderthals were hunting elephants weighing up to 15 tons, twice the size of a woolly mammoth, and the proof is some of the most stunning evidence ever found. At the Leyringen site in Germany, archaeologists excavating the remains of a straight-tusked elephant found a complete wooden spear in between its ribs. The spear had warped over the 125,000 years it had sat there. It was nearly 8 feet long and made of yew, an extremely strong wood that was used for English longbows. Such a weapon could withstand an incredible amount of force, but could it really have been used to kill the largest land mammal of the Ice Age? The key evidence is on the ribs. 7 of the ribs have deep cut marks made by stone tools. They are consistent with the butchery of the elephant by Neanderthals. But one rib showed something more intriguing, a series of cut marks on its internal face. In order to make these cuts, the Neanderthal had to be working from the inside of the rib cage. This means that the carcass must have been fresh, as the organs were being targeted. This matters because if the organs were worth recovering, the Neanderthals must have had primary access to the carcass. No direct evidence of a spear impact was found on the elephant's skeleton, but this isn't surprising. What is far more important is the age of the elephant. It was a male around 30 years of age, at the prime of its life. Such a force of nature wouldn't simply die at a lakeshore and then happen to have a spear fall beside him. A spear between the ribs, a fresh kill, a prime bull, this all points to one direction. Neanderthals were targeting the largest species of the Ice Age with simple wooden spears. Throwing a dart from distance is, one thing, but actually going up and stabbing an elephant with a wooden spear is just insane. And remarkably, this isn't the only evidence we have to support this idea. At another German site called Neumark Nord, more straight-tusked elephants have been found butchered by Neanderthals. The demographics suggest that these Neanderthals were directly hunting adult males, animals which on average weighed 13 tons, with the largest weighing up to 19 tons. So why on earth would Neanderthals target them? Adult male elephants spend a lot of time by themselves as their size alone is a deterrence to almost any predator. But without the protection of the herd, Neanderthals had a much easier time taking them down. Such a large animal could have fed a band of Neanderthals for over 3 months if they could keep the meat from spoiling. But researchers hypothesized that larger groups came together to hunt communally. Focusing on adult males would have given these groups a high return for a smaller risk. And while it is hard to imagine hunting such a large animal with simple wooden spears, it has actually been heavily documented by hunter-gatherers in Africa in the past century. The Mbuti pygmies of the Congo actually used to hunt African forest elephants with nothing but wooden thrusting spears. Adult men only stand 4'6" and weigh just 100 pounds on average. Meanwhile, their prey weigh in excess of 5 tons. Among the Mbuti, there were several ways to hunt elephants. Large group hunts occurred where lone elephants were targeted by dozens of spears. They would target the backside of the knees to immobilize the animals, leading to a long drawn-out death. Often, elephants were targeted by only 3 hunters. They would track an elephant and wait until it went into a muddy marsh. While distracted, one hunter sneaks underneath the animal and thrusts a metal spear deep into its abdomen. As the elephant runs into the cover of the trees, the spear shaft knocks against branches and cuts the intestines further. The elephant quickly loses its ability to resist, and the hunters are able to finish it off. Neanderthals may very well have hunted large elephants like this. Both Neumark Nord and Leringen were located on the shores of bodies of water which would have limited the elephant's mobility. Though a wooden spear may have not been able to mortally wound an elephant in one stab, a well-made large stone point certainly could. Neanderthal stone points were just as deadly as anything we were making during the Stone Age, and we know Neanderthals were brave enough to get this close to dangerous animals. Over half of Neanderthals were severely injured during their lifetimes, and this is evident with another incredible discovery. Cave lions were the apex predators of Ice Age Eurasia. Males were 20% larger than modern lions. But that right there is the rib of a cave lion with an impact from a wooden spear. 48,000 years ago, a Neanderthal stabbed the apex predator of the Ice Age and butchered it after. Cuts around the hands and feet suggest that they took the pelt from the animal. So some Neanderthals stabbed a cave lion with a wooden spear and kept its skin as a trophy. Neanderthals were literally built different. Neanderthals may have been the bravest hunters to ever live, but our ancestors were undoubtedly the deadliest. And nowhere is this more evident than the Americas. When our species crossed Beringia into the New World, we found an ecosystem absolutely teeming with game that had never seen a human before. But hunting these animals were the most deadly predators of the Ice Age. Dire wolves, saber-toothed cats, giant cheetahs, and the biggest cat that ever lived, the American lion. Here is the skull of the American lion. It is insane, but it is dwarfed by the true king of the Americas, the short-faced bear. At an average of 1,400 pounds, this bear was over twice the size of a grizzly. When walking on all fours, it was tall enough to look the average man in the eye. When standing on its hind legs, males could be nearly 12 feet tall. This beast was truly a force to be reckoned with in the Pleistocene Americas. In the late 1980s, biologist Val Geist hypothesized that the short-faced bear prevented humans from migrating into North America. They may have been so physically dominant that humans just couldn't compete. That was until archaeologists found direct evidence that ancient humans were eating short-faced bears. At the site of Lubbock Lake in Texas, archaeologists discovered a Clovis culture butchering site. Here they found butchered remains of Columbian mammoths, camels, horses, but the most surprising find of all was the short-faced bear. Its remains show that hunters carefully removed the skin of the animal, even from the hands, suggesting they intended to keep the animal's hide. Its meat was also harvested, while one of its bones was even turned into a cutting tool. We don't know how these ancient hunters procured this bear. They may have just found its corpse, but the possibility remains that they directly hunted it. Or maybe they were forced to face it in a confrontation. What we do know is that 12,000 years ago in Texas, some badass hunters were chewing on some short-faced bear meat and keeping its skin as a trophy. But surprisingly, at 3 other sites in Ohio, Utah, and Idaho, stone artifacts have been found in direct association with short-faced bear remains. The evidence in Idaho consisted of a short-faced bear foot bone charred in a fire. At another site in New Mexico, short-faced bear hairs were even found in a cooking pit. Human hunting and butchery of large animals would have put them in direct competition with the short-faced bear. There would have been times where these people had to make a choice between starving or defending their kill from a 1,500-pound monster. Though this sounds like an impossible challenge to us in the modern day, 20 skilled hunters armed with spear throwers would have been a formidable force even for the deadliest predators of North America. But the short-faced bear was minuscule compared to the largest animal of the Americas, the Columbian mammoth. At up to 12 metric tons and about as tall as a giraffe, these beasts towered over all others. But ancient humans found an ingenious way to bring them down. In Mexico City, of all places, archaeologists discovered 2 man-made mammoth traps containing the remains of at least 14 mammoths. These pits, dated to around 15,000 years ago, are among the first known structures built specifically for hunting mammoths. The pits were about 6 feet deep and 80 feet long, containing hundreds of mammoth bones. The skulls were flipped upside down, perhaps because the hunters were after the mammoth's tongues. This site is extraordinary to say the least. Digging such a large pit would have been a monumental task. Organizing hunters to start digging in hopes that they could trap a mammoth reveals that these people were capable and sophisticated strategists. This discovery is truly unique, though this practice may have been much more widespread than we are aware of at the moment. Further north, 13,800 years ago, we have direct evidence of mastodon hunting. A giant rib was found to have a bone spear tip embedded in it. The spear tip seems to have also been made of mastodon bone, probably thrown in the animal's side. The mammoth site is undeniable evidence that mastodon were hunted, while butchered mastodon remains at multiple human sites suggest that this practice may have been common. All the way down in Brazil, we have evidence of another mastodon hunt. A 1-year-old no-tail mastodon calf was found with a spear point deeply embedded in its skull. Some hunter 13,000 years ago speared this poor baby in the face. For what reason, we can only guess. But back in Texas, hunters were coming up with a far more ingenious hunting strategy. They were driving dozens of bison off the edge of a cliff. The bonfire shelter preserves the earliest buffalo jump site in the Americas. A layer called Bone Bed 2, which consists of as many as 120 bison antiquus, was created by at least 3 separate events, the earliest of which dates back to 11,000 to 12,000 years ago. The practice of driving bison off of cliffs was well documented by early American explorers. The Crow tribe of Montana used a strategy which utilized the entire society. A runner would corral the unsuspecting animals towards a cliff edge, where other hunters would be waiting behind trees and rock piles. The hunters would emerge, chasing the panicked animals towards the edge. As the bison in the back unknowingly pushed their kin off of a cliff, the majority of the tribe was waiting at the bottom ready to dispatch, dismember, and devour the hairy brutes. Some of these hunts reportedly killed as many as 1,000 bison at a time. The hunters would often try to use everything they could from these carcasses, but in situations of such excess, sometimes they left putrid carcasses on the landscape with only their fat-rich tongues missing. It is amazing that such a complex strategy was utilized in the Americas at least 12,000 years ago. And while running a dozen bison off of a cliff is impressive, the next animal we are talking about could fit an entire mammoth in its mouth. The Bangyu-dae petroglyphs are some of the oldest art in South Korea. Here, more than 300 figures were carved into the walls, mostly consisting of marine animals like seals, sharks, and whales. But the most intriguing are the boats that are pursuing these animals. They are large vessels carrying up to 8 on board with harpoons in hand. At over 7,000 years old, these are the oldest depictions of whaling ever discovered. But at other sites, archaeologists have actually found direct evidence. A massive boat 4 meters long was found at one site, while at another, whale bones with harpoon wounds were unearthed. The remains include gray, humpback, and right whales. They dated between 5 to 7,000 years ago, proving that the petroglyphs document real events. These animals weighed over 30 metric tons, with right whales weighing up to 100 tons. It would have been a complex and difficult task to target them with simple boats and bone-tipped harpoons, but they were clearly successful, as their bones were found at sites all over South Korea. An animal this large would have fed a community for months, while also providing bones for tools and skin for shelters and clothing. The ancient maritime culture of South Korea was impressive, though they were far from the only ones to hunt whales in the Stone Age. In Brazil, archaeologists have found abundant evidence of whale hunting going back 5,000 years. Massive bone harpoons were used to target baleen whales. 50% of the bones are from the massive southern right whale, one of the largest whales on Earth. They are slow-moving and float after death, making them fairly easy to hunt even with simple technology. At 50 to 90 tons, a single successful hunt would have yielded over 10 times the food that Neanderthals were getting from an elephant hunt. It is really unfathomable to think about that much food for hunter-gatherers. The trouble of securing a whale was certainly worth it. And all the way on the coast of Oregon, archaeologists found direct evidence of whale hunting. A bone point made from elk antler was found lodged in the hand bones of a humpback whale. Other sites in Alaska, Norway, and in the Arctic prove that even with Stone Age technology, humans were capable of taking down some of the largest animals on Earth. By now you understand that ancient humans were without a doubt the apex predators wherever they went. But the question still remains, are we the reason why a dozen species of megafauna went extinct at the end of the last glacial period? Decades ago, archaeologists started to notice a pattern. Wherever our species showed up in a region, the extinction of large animals soon followed. The further we got away from Africa, the more unprepared animals were for us. In North America, 72% of species vanished, while 83% perished in South America. In the most isolated continent, Australia, 88% of large animals went extinct. And on isolated islands, over 90% of species often went extinct when we arrived. As we have seen through physical proof, the humans that settled in these new lands were capable of directly taking down the biggest and most dangerous animals there were. But could they really have been that apocalyptic? Many scholars are unconvinced, citing climate as a more substantial factor in the demise of these species. After all, Massive ice caps covered the planet for over 100,000 years before melting away in a geologic blink of an eye. But proponents of the overkill hypothesis would state that climate change is a convenient hypothesis. There is always a correlation you can make between climate and extinction. But North and South America are extremely diverse. From woodlands, jungles, and deserts, there were plenty of environments for animals to retreat to. Mammoths were some of the most versatile animals that roam the tallest mountains to tropical plains. And somehow they suddenly went extinct because of climate. They had survived plenty of glacial and interglacial periods before. The only thing different this time was the presence of an ambitious and uniquely deadly ape. The Clovis culture was almost certainly not the first people to enter the Americas, though their story is one of the greatest in human history. Clovis points, the hallmark of the Clovis toolkit, were invented around 13,000 years ago, likely in Texas. And within a century or two, they could be found from Canada to South America. This culture had figured out a way to utterly dominate their environment, and the key may have been hunting mammoths. There are over a dozen sites which prove Clovis people hunted and butchered mammoths. While this number sounds small, as we have learned, finding direct evidence is extremely rare. And over a dozen sites makes North America by far the highest frequency of proboscidean hunting on any continent. Of the entire archaeological records of Africa, Europe, Asia, and North America, there are a total of 16 strong cases for the hunting of elephants, and 14 of these are found at Clovis sites in North America. Mammoth bones are in fact the most common animal in Clovis remains. But archaeologists just recently made a new discovery that proves something incredible. Only one Clovis culture skeleton has ever been found, the 18-month-old Anzic I. Since the bone tissue and tooth enamel at birth are built from the mother's diet, as well as from nursing, researchers are able to analyze isotopes to see where the protein of her diet was coming from. What they found was that mammoth was the largest contributor to the mother's diet, followed by elk, bison, and camel, while the other contributions were negligible. When compared to other animals, Anzic I's mother was most similar to that of Homotherium, a specialist saber-toothed predator that mainly targeted young mammoths. This supports the so-called Clovis megafaunal specialist model, the use of sophisticated technology and high residential mobility to subsist on mammoths, an adaptation allowing them to rapidly expand across the Americas. Some scholars are starting to understand Clovis as a ritual big game hunting culture. They appeared as a culture with a distinct technology and strategy that facilitated hunting mammoths. We don't know how they did it, but the Mbuti elephant hunters prove that there are simple and efficient ways to bring down massive proboscideans with only a few hunters. A successful hunt brings dozens from the surrounding community together, nourishing them, and bringing the hunter incredible prestige. Regular hunting could support larger groups in the spread of Clovis culture. The Clovis culture may represent one of the most remarkable cultural innovations in human history. In only a couple of centuries, the ancestors of the Native Americans devised a technology and a lifestyle to be able to prey on the largest animals of their world. In many ways, it is similar to the near extinction of the bison in the 19th century. Humans had coexisted with bison for thousands of years, but incredible new technology and cultural pressure nearly led to their extinction in only a few decades. There was a ton of debate over the effect that human predation had on the world's megafauna. The overkill hypothesis has largely been discounted by the majority of scholars, which agree that climate was the major driver in the demise of the megafauna, but accept that human hunting exerted some pressure on these animals. Just how much pressure varies between scholars. Personally, I'd say that I don't fully back the overkill hypothesis because obviously climate was a huge factor, but I think the evidence supports that we may have been the straw that broke the camel's back. I just think if the Americas remained human-free, I feel like we would have had a lot more surviving megafaunal species. You're telling me that mammoths were just destined for extinction? I mean, how else can you explain the total extermination of so many animals? Other ideas like the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis exist. The idea that a comet caused the end of the last glacial period and led to continent-wide wildfires that ended the megafauna. While this idea is certainly charismatic, the reality is that it lacks scientific basis. The evidence of supposed impact markers was not reproducible, and a 2025 paper attempting to revive the idea ended up being retracted. We certainly have a ton more to learn about this time period, but one thing is for sure. Our ancestors were absolute freaks of nature. With sticks, stones, and pure grit, we took down the largest animals of the Ice Age. And if you want to learn more about ancient humans, watch this video next. I promise it will blow your mind. Also, just click it, I'm trying to get my engagement up on these end screen squares.